Chapter 16, The Higher Sabbatian Secrets. Every word of God is tried. He is a shield unto them that take refuge in him. And thou not unto his words, lest he reprove thee, and thou be found a liar. Proverbs chapter 30, verses 5 and 6. Be content with what God has revealed to men in the Torah, and not go beyond that with dangerous speculation about the mysteries which baffle comprehension. Rabbi A. Cohen, editor, Soncino Bible. The Kabbalah of revolution is a basic ingredient of Gnostic communist theology. The mystical element in revolution takes many forms. Even if leading personalities in the revolutions of 1848 and 1917 were rational, it should be realized that the king-priest class of backers was addicted to raw mysticism of the worst kind, black or red Kabbalah, as opposed to the innocuous white Kabbalah. Frankist Sabbatian mysticism, or the Red Kabbalah, was a very important factor in the Communist Revolution of 1848 and the Bolshevik Revolution of 1917. It is significant today not only to the Platonic classes of the Old Left, but even to those of the New Left who hate the Old Left because they consider it to be dominated by the ruling rich class. They prefer to have a totally proletarian revolution rather than one financed by a Platonic ruling class that would continue to impose itself well after the revolution. Thus, it is not strange to find in New Left circles today obsessions with Kabbalah, occultism, witchcraft, and Satanism. They go hand in hand. The international occult neo-Frankist cult of the all-seeing eye has in its hierarchy known Satanists. The Gnostic Golden Dawn and the Tool Society were replete with Satanists. The Illuminati Asiatic Brethren Lodges, heirs to Frankist Sabbatian mysticism, based much of their theosophy on Jonathan Eibeschutz's Gnostic antinomian work, the Avo Hayom El Ha'ayin, literally, I shall approach the eye today. However, this title is verbatim the verse in Genesis chapter 24, verse 42, in which ayin, which usually means eye, here means spring or fountain, and concerns Abraham's servant Eleazar's narrative about Rebekah. It states, "And I came to the spring today." The first word of this verse may be read with different vowels to indicate either the future or past tense. The concepts of illumination are inextricably interwoven with the eye. The higher secrets of this verse will be discussed later. The Talmud relates that in occult practice, the demon of blindness is called shabriri. The demon can be foiled by taking the word shabriri and writing it down in the form of a triangle, diminishing it a letter at a time, so that we have as follows. And you can see here the diminution is the first two letters with each new line. Now, the remaining two letters forming Re in Hebrew are Resh and Yod. In the Hebrew Kabbalah, there is a numerical value assigned to every letter of the Hebrew alphabet. In Greek Kabbalah, the same is true for the Greek alphabet. The Hebrew numerical equivalents have been used not only by the rabbis in biblical exegesis, but have been indulged in by mystics. This technique of Kabbalistic numerology is called gematria, which we shall employ freely to decipher Gnostic secrets. In Hebrew, there is a letter ayin as well as a word ayin, meaning eye. The Hebrew ayin is equivalent to 70, and Re is equivalent to 3 times 70, or 210. Illumination is brought about by destroying the demon of blindness through triangular diminution. The pyramid and triangle are important Gnostic symbols. The eye of illumination of the Illuminati is above a pyramid, and that of the Gnostic Golden Dawn is inside a triangle. When ayin is spelled out in Hebrew, it consists of 3 letters whose numerical equivalent is 130. The triangle in which the eye sits is also symbolic of the Platonic 3 classes, the working, military, and the ruling classes. In Sabbatian mysticism, sin is holy and it is to be indulged in. This is the opposite of what the Torah preaches. Therefore, one of the biblical sections of the Shema, which is central in the daily worship of the Jew, was completely reversed by Gnostics and provides the link between the hidden eye and the fecundity principle of sexual anarchy. Thus, we read in the ending Shema formula in the book of Numbers, "The Lord spoke to Moses, saying, Speak unto the Israelites, and instruct them to make themselves fringes on the corners of their garments throughout the ages. Thou shalt look at it and recall all the commandments of the Lord, and observe them, so that you will not follow your hearts and your eye, which you are wont to lust after, in order that you shall be reminded to observe all my commandments, and be holy to your God. I am the Lord your God, who brought you out of the land of Egypt to be your God. I am the Lord your God. Numbers chapter 15, verses 37 through 41. The religious Jew today puts on his talit prayer shawl as the four-cornered garment in the synagogue, the construction of which has been handed down from generation to generation as part of the oral law which is not described in the Torah. The fringes of the talit consist of 8 strings and 5 knots, with the strings wound around in a particular fashion. The religious Jewish male also by custom wears a talit katan, a smaller garment with fringes under his shirt. The tzitzit, or fringes as they are called, remind the Jew of his obligation to follow the laws of God. The concept that pursuing one's sexual passions and impulses causes one to go away from God and reject the commandments finds expression in many facets of Judaism. The idolatrous cults were known for their anarchy, and the rabbis suggested that those Jews who lusted after the cults did so not because they believed in the divinity of the idols, but because they lusted after the promiscuity of the cults. The theme is repeated in many other instances. The story is told of a Talmudic scholar who made elaborate arrangements with a beautiful prostitute. As he was undressing and was about to indulge his passions, he saw his tzitzit and was immediately reminded of God and not to go lusting after his passions. At this point, he told the prostitute that he could not do what he originally wanted to because he had been reminded by his fringes of his godly obligations. The prostitute was completely dumbfounded, as she had never experienced anything like this in all her life. The Talmud further relates that she found her way into the Talmudic academy where the student attended and beseeched Rabbi Kaya and the sages of Israel to give her more information about Judaism. Thereafter, she converted to Judaism. The Sabbatians believed that there was a higher Torah, which they call the Torah of Absolute, that supplanted this Torah and was its complete antithesis. The section in Numbers would, in this antinomian heretical Torah, have to read, "Thou shalt pursue the wishes of your heart and the lust of your eyes." In their theosophy, the eye becomes the vehicle and the symbol of sexual anarchy. And so it was that when Jonathan Eibeschutz's evil antinomian book, Va'avo Hayom El Hayin, which articulated these concepts, circulated throughout Eastern Europe, it even influenced some religious Jews, who became completely corrupted when they read his work and indulged in wife-swapping. The book also catalyzed the practice of adultery and incest to turn rife in certain communities. Some who were caught in this vice, in more rational moments, realized what they had done and came tearfully before the rabbinic tribunals of the small towns of Moravia and Poland, and related how they had been ensnared by this book into all types of indulgences. Christian Gnostics, centuries before Jacob Frank, developed their own revolutionary theology and inflamed mobs to commit some of the most unspeakable crimes in the name of Christianity, such as the flagellants. The Muslims similarly had their militant Gnostics. The Frankistan Illuminati called upon extreme revolutionary Gnostic millennial messianists of several religions for mystic collaborations to unite in revolutionary upheaval. The mystic element, however, did one other thing. It provided for a mysterious continuum to be transmitted from generation to generation, so that the continuity that one observed in one revolution would lift up its ugly head in subsequent revolutions. For this reason, the Illuminati preferred to subvert Masonic groups, which they so hated, because much of the Masonic ritual is transmitted from generation to generation, providing a vehicle to transmit an antinomian Torah of evil over the ages. In Judaism, the Torah and its teachings have been transmitted from generation to generation, including its unwritten oral laws, much of which were finally put into writing in the form of the Talmud by what is known as the Masoretic process, coming from the Hebrew word masar, or to transmit. The transmission process is related in an early section of the Talmud as follows. Moses received the Torah from Sinai and handed it to Joshua. Joshua transmitted it to the judges to the prophets to the elders, and the elders to the men of the great assembly. In the Sabbatian theosophy, the heretical Torah was called the Torah of Absolute, a play on the latter word which has dual meaning, emanations and aristocracy. Emanations in the mystical sense and aristocratic in the Platonic class sense. This would likewise have a parallel transmission. The Hebrew word Sinai consists of the letters Samach, 60, Yud, 10, Nun, 50, and Yud, 10, which equals 130, the numerical equivalent of Ayin, I. The Sinaitic revelation becomes secretly transformed into their superior evil Torah revelation concept. One tool utilized by Kabbalists over the centuries was the Atbash alphabet. Interestingly enough, this alphabet antedates the Kabbalistic numerical system of gematria and is found in the book of Jeremiah. The Atbash alphabet is the Hebrew equivalent of the AZBY alphabet in English. That is, the first letter equals the last letter as a code, in which A equals Z, B equals Y, C equals X, etc. In Hebrew, Aleph, the first letter, equals Tav, the last letter. Bet, the second letter, equals Shin, the next to last letter, etc. The Hebrew Shishach, Jeremiah 25:26 and 51:41, is Atbash code for Babel or Babylon. Similarly, Lavi Kemi is Atbash for Kazdan or Chaldea. We know the Sabbatians inverted the Hebrew letters of Moses' name Moshe, which in the Atbash alphabet comes out to Zevi, an allusion to Shabbatai Zevi. Utilizing these two principles of gematria, Moses received the Torah from Sinai, becomes in Sabbatianism. Zevi received the Torah of Atzilut from the I. Since the Hebrew word Atzilut has two meanings, aristocracy and emanations, to the innermost depths or wealthy Sabbatians, the Torah of Atzilut was an aristocratic Torah of Plato, the higher wisdom of kings and priests. To the common Sabbatians, it was preached as the mystical Torah of the emanations of the superior spheres. The absolute emanations concept had been popularized to the masses by the profound saintly mystic Rabbi Isaac Luria, 1534 to 1572, and his disciple, Rabbi Chaim Vital, 1543 to 1620. The God of Israel, who gave the Jews the Torah, was considered inferior to Shabbatai Zevi, who received the antinomian Torah from a higher Gnostic deity. Nevertheless, in classic Sabbatianism, the deity favors Israel, i.e., the people of Jewish descent violating the Torah. Paralleling the Talmudic text on Torah transmission, a Sabbatian perverted reading of the text leaves room to interpret the elders as the Illuminati, the Bund Gerechten, the League of the Just, and the International Communist Party. The men of the Great Assembly can refer to the United Nations, and specifically the General Assembly, which has Gnostic millennialist overtones and, incidentally, has shown time and time again that it is one of the greatest enemies of the Jewish people and the State of Israel. Among its worst actions to date has been the condemnation of Zionism as racism. The UN often behaves as a Gnostic body. Most of the diplomats of the UN today are actually united by Gnostic concepts. If there ever were a personality in the Torah that would be hated by the Sabbatians, it would be the personality of Pinchas, son of Eleazar, the son of Aaron the high priest. The Bible relates, "Just then one of the Israelites came and brought a Midianite woman over to his companions in the sight of Moses and the Israelite community, who were weeping at the entrance of the tent of meeting. When Pinchas, son of Eleazar, son of Aaron the priest, saw this, he left the assembly, and, taking a spear in his hand, he followed the Israelite into the chamber and stabbed both of them, the Israelite and the woman, through the belly. Then the plague against the Israelites was checked. Those who died in the plague numbered 24,000. Numbers chapter 25, verses 6 through 9. The incident took place after Moses had Baal Peor worshippers killed, for it was when Israel was staying at Shittim that the people began to commit harlotry with the women of Moab. The Eye of Osiris is the symbol of the cult of the all-seeing eye, and was also that of Baal Peor worship. In the Frankist theosophy, it was necessary that Pinchas, who explicitly was rewarded by God with long life, and whom we find mentioned later on in the book of Judges, be drafted in the service of Satan. Legend abides that he changed his name later on to Elijah the prophet. Elijah is symbolized in the Frankist theosophy on the coins that were discussed in Chapter 10 as Shabbatai Zevi's helpmate. There is another Gnostic artifact that attempts to do this. In Habsburg, Austria, there is a mysterious spear called the Spear of Longinus. According to the Gnostic pagan legend, this is the spear that Pinchas used to kill the Midianite princess and her Israelite partner. The Gnostic pagan belief maintains it was the same spear that was used by a Teuton named Longinus, who served in the Roman legions, to pierce the side of Jesus when he was crucified. It was this spear and the legends attached to it that played an important part in medieval millennial enthusiasm and some of its perverted revolutionary byproducts. The spear was the property of Otto the Great and Charlemagne, and according to the Gnostic legend, the person who held the spear in his hand could use it for good to control the world, or for evil. The symbol's millennial enthusiasm was also the cause of an argument between the German philosopher Nietzsche and the composer Wagner. Attached to the theosophy of the spear is the quest for messianism involved in the Gnostic legend of the Holy Grail, which was the basis for Wagner's opera Parsifal. Wagner saw in the spear and in the Parsifal legend and in its mystical theosophy the purity of Aryan Christianity as a redeeming messiah of the world. Nietzsche saw in the quest for the Holy Grail complete repudiation of Christianity and its values. The spear became to Nietzsche the symbol of the Antichrist, and Longinus as an Aryan member of the Grail legends. Prior to World War I, when Hitler was living in abject poverty, he would spend hours in Habsburg, Austria, contemplating the spear, and vowed that he would one day take possession of the spear and hold the world in his domination. The spear became Hitler's obsession, and is the subject of Trevor Ravencroft's book, The Spear of Destiny. Jacob Frank, born Leibowitz, changed his name to Frank. History books say it is because he went to Turkey, where Europeans were called Frank. Although this may be so, it appears that Frank, who embraced Christian Gnosticism, also identified his name with the theosophy of the spear and the Grail mysteries. These were reduced to writing under Charlemagne and his associates, who were called Franks, being part of the mystical personalities described in Parsifal. It was members of Charlemagne's court and his knights with whom the quest for the Holy Grail could be identified. The question now has to be asked if there was a connection between Adolf Hitler and the Frankists. The answer is yes, and will be further explored. Suffice it to say that Adolf Hitler was motivated by infernal Gnosticism, sharing certain elements of Sabbatian Frankism. The Spear of Destiny obsessed him and represented the overthrow of Judaism. Since Longinus symbolized Aryan Christianity inheriting the spear of Pinchas the Jew, Longinus's successors symbolized the Antichrist Gnostic overthrow of Christianity. For the Frankist Sabbatians, one converted from one religion to another and sought to destroy it, to replace all religions with Gnostic Sabbatianism. They would then have their millennium. Hitler's New Order, or Third Reich, would reign for a millennium. Getting back to Wagner and Parsifal, it should be noted that Lohengrin was written on the eve of the Communist Revolution of 1848 by Wagner. The Sabbatians utilized Atbashan, amulets, and certain esoteric secrets. Shabbatai's name itself was cryptically written as Babbatai, as in the first letter of his name Shin was substituted with the Bet. When the Hebrew letters comprising the organization known as B'nai B'rit are rearranged, one obtains Babbatai Neri, which decodes to Shabbatai is my illumination. In other words, the hidden meaning of B'nai B'rit is Sabbatian enlightenment. The term B'nai B'rit, however, does occur in the Mishnah, or in Judaic literature. The B'nai B'rith was founded by Jewish-born German Sabbatian Bundists who immigrated to the United States in the 19th century. By 1860, the B'nai B'rith had 50 lodges in the United States. Other secrets embodied in the B'nai B'rith Neri are as follows. The Reich and the Yod are equal to 210 and are symbolic of 3 times 70, the symbolism of which was explained before. Indeed, B'nai B'rith's first monthly in the U.S., 1886, was called the Menorah Journal. The menorah is a candelabrum, a source of illumination. Now, Jacob Frank appointed 12 male apostles and 12 female apostles, who had a Gnostic connotation of the 12 tribes related to the apocalypse in Christian Gnostic interpretations of the Book of Revelations. The independent order of B'nai B'rith was originally founded in New York City by 12 German Sabbatians, October 13, 1843, but by 1868, its original purpose began to be, quote, overshadowed by a program of philanthropy and political action for the protection of Jewish rights at home and abroad, end quote. The president of B'nai B'rith in 1868 was Julius Bien, 1826 to 1909. B'nai B'rith later became international in scope. Its hierarchy was forced in the 1920s to give up its secret nature. However, they went underground. B'nai B'rith definitely performed generous acts of philanthropy and was involved in good causes. But like all good Sabbatian-based organizations, it was two-faced. Several lodges began to spring up after the Berlin Lodge, such as those in Hamburg in 1887 and Frankfurt in 1888. There were 29 lodges in active operation in Germany, with a total membership of 3,000. Julius Bien, communist revolutionary, inaugurated Germany's first B'nai B'rith Lodge in 1885. In 1893, the B'nai B'rith organization celebrated their 50th year, and the Jubilee celebration was noted in Hamburg with the publication of a book which revealed much information as to how far the order had come in a short time in Germany, deriving most of its active people from affiliates of the Royal Masonic Lodges. Another important part of the Sabbatians' theosophy comes from verses in Song of Songs, one describing Solomon's purple love couch, and the other, thine head upon thee is like caramel, and the hair on the head is like purple. The king is here in the galleries. The Hebrew argaman, purple, is Gnostically interpreted here with sex and royalty. Sefer Raziel 40b. Each Hebrew letter, A-R-G-M-N, stands for Uriel, Raphael, Gabriel, Michael, and Nuriel. In the theosophy of argaman, there are formulas for getting rid of evil spirits in which the inscription of the angel argaman is written, and this is also developed in a triangle. Argaman contains enlightenment through angels, Nuriel and Raphael, which stand for illumination. The Aleph is symbolic of Edom. The Kabbalistic book, Sefer Raziel, 1701 Amsterdam, has amulets containing argaman in two triangles, one on top of the other to form a hexagram. Argaman also meant that the messianic angels are ushered in through enlightenment and revolution. Argaman is a formula for bloody revolution. In rearrangement of argaman, 294, when one subtracts the magic value of 280, 4 times the value of the Hebrew letter Ayin, which is 70, one is left with 14. 14 is written numerically in Hebrew as Yud and Daled, which also spells out Yad, the Hebrew word for hand. The 2 initials on the bottom part of the Sabbatian coin, which was symbolic of the Sabbatian messiahs, Jonathan Ibeschutz and Jacob Frank, were Yad and Daled. Yad is also symbolic of sexual intercourse. The Sabbatians would blaspheme the ritual washing of hands blessing made by religious Jews, Ele Nitlat Yadem, and pronounce it over illicit sexual intercourse. Yad is also the word printed on the mysterious Gnostic Frankist coins, symbolizing Jonathan Ibeschutz and Jacob Frank. Yad is also equivalent in Mispar Katan Gematria, in unit digits, to Ra, or evil. As when Pharaoh said to Moses, "Evil is before you," Rashi states that Ra was the name of a star that is the sign of blood and slaughter. Exodus 10:10. Another Gnostic aspect of angelology is the apocalyptic connection with the Messiah for the vanquishing of Satan through Michael, as described in the Christian book of the Revelation of St. John, chapter 13. It is speculated that Nuriel of the Kabbalah was changed by the Frankists to Nebris, who was a demon in charge of infernal pleasure and enlightenment, or illumination, so that in the word near are Nebris and Ramon, the Syrian deity who, according to later medieval Satanism, served as Satan's ambassador to Russia. Hence, there would be a mystical connection that enlightenment would have to come through Russia. Russia was viewed as the ultimate vehicle through which the Messiah would come. This may also explain the Syrian-Russian terror alliance in Gnostic satanic theosophy terms. Accordingly, in 1767, Jacob Frank, while in prison from 1760 to 1773, initiated contacts with the Greek Orthodox Bishop of Warsaw, Koniski, and appointed agents who carried out negotiations with the Moscow Synod of Greek Orthodoxy, promising 20,000 converts to Greek Orthodoxy. Frank's agents in charge of the Russian campaign were Judah Loeb and Bema Speer. Frank's Russian aspirations were reflected in some irrational acts of his, such as claiming to the officialdom of Offenbach that his daughter Eva was the illegitimate daughter of Catherine the Great. Frank's plans with the Greek Orthodox failed. They were thwarted by Baruch Yavon, brother-in-law of Rabbi Jacob Emden, who exposed the entire conspiratorial plot. Each line of the argaman triangle also contains a secret reference to a satanic prince, as in RGMN in gematria, which equals 293, also equals AFBRI. Now, Alfbri begins the Hebrew text of Job 37:11, describing how God lades thick clouds with moisture. Gnostics declared that Alfbri is the prince of rain, Reishi Taunot 7b. This very concept negates the biblical verses attributing rain directly to God. Indeed, the Talmud explicitly states that God has appointed no emissary or angel in charge of the rain. Nevertheless, Gnostics succeeded in introducing into the annual Geshem, or rain prayer, composed by Elazar Kalir, an introductory verse stating, Alfbri is the prince of rain, under the pretext that he assists God. This heresy has been removed from the certain prayer books, as in Renat Israel. Both harmless and harmful secret organizations are known to have their hierarchical classes of adepts. The Illuminati ranks of king, prince, and magus are typical of Gnostic hierarchical structures and are, in this case, symbolic of Plato's Republic ruling intellectual class.